Well, good Friday afternoon. Meteorologist Evan Stewart here with an update on Hurricane Erin. This is the 2 o'clock update coming in from the National Hurricane Center, and not much change. Of course, Erin became a hurricane this morning. As of the 11 o'clock advisory, when the Hurricane Hunter aircraft were flying through Erin, they found sustained winds that supported hurricane strength in one part of the storm. And so we now have Hurricane Erin. It's our 5th named storm of the year and our first hurricane of the year. So zooming in, this again is Hurricane Erin. It is about 500 miles, a little bit less than that, towards the east of the Lesser Antilles, the northern parts of the Leeward Islands. And this is a look at the regular satellite view. I'm going to switch it up here because we can always enhance the cloud tops, and that kind of helps us see what's going on inside the storm. There are a couple ways that we can do that, and a couple of different versions of some of these color banks that we use, but I think you can sort of see a little bit better the flare up of the thunderstorm activity right through there as we went through this morning and into this afternoon as the storm moves off towards the northwest. Let's give another little bit of a different view here where some of the coldest cloud tops, some of the biggest thunderstorm cloud tops are there in white, and you can see there was a lot of activity a little bit earlier this morning. We have seen a little bit of a diminishment of some of the biggest thunderstorms inside, and that's why we haven't really seen the increase in the wind speed as of the 2 o'clock advisory. So 11 o'clock had winds of 75 miles per hour as of the 2 o'clock advisory. Again, we have winds of 75 miles per hour, gusts up to 90. Of course, we always base the hurricane strength on the sustained winds, and it's usually in one small part of the storm, one quadrant of the storm, so to speak. Right now, Erin is moving to the west-northwest at 17. It slowed down a little bit. It was, I believe, 18 as of the 11 o'clock advisory. And the pressure is holding at 993 millibars, again, 4 to 15 miles east of the northern Leeward Islands. Moving to the west-northwest. So that forecast continues to call for some steady strengthening as we go through the night into the day tomorrow, and Erin becoming a major hurricane as we get into the day on Sunday here, a Category 3 hurricane. This would, of course, it's already our first hurricane of the year. Now it's our first major hurricane, and it is expected to pass north of Puerto Rico and continue to strengthen here. Some very, very warm waters. The atmosphere is very favorable for development of the storm as well. So we do expect steady strengthening right through the weekend and into early next week. And then we see that turn to the north. And that's the big question, is how quickly does that turn occur? Again, remember the cone here is following the margin of error for the center of the storm. The storm is much larger, so even though the center of the storm is passing north of Puerto Rico, even if it's here on the southern edge of the cone, the storm is large enough that Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, the Dominican Republic will feel the effects with some outer bands of some winds and some outer bands of some rain. But the other big story will be the swells that will be coming off of the storm. Even early next week, we'll likely see red flags maybe as early as Monday here through our beaches. We already have a moderate threat of rip currents into the day tomorrow, mainly because of northeast winds not associated here with Erin. But I wouldn't be surprised if red flags are already up by Monday of next week as these swells propagate from this major hurricane towards the southeast coastline. And that is going to give us an increased threat of rip currents as we go through next week. We'll see rough surf, possibly some beach erosion. And again, the question is, where inside of this cone does the storm track? Right now, general consensus is it's going to track between Cape Hatteras and the island of Bermuda. And you can see that's sort of what the Hurricane Center is doing with its cone forecast. Now let's take a look at our two major computer models, and I'll say that the European, that is here in red, has been outperforming the American model. That's been a trend that we've seen over the past several years. The European model has definitely been much better with the forecast and the tracks of tropical systems. And the European is a little bit closer to the U.S. coastline. Keeps it offshore, but it is a little bit closer. So let's sort of walk through this, take you through Sunday, and you can see some somewhat good agreement. The center of the American is about in there. The center of the European is there. So there's a little bit of a disagreement, more southern track here of the European model. And then as we go into Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, you can definitely see that divergence of the two models. Again, the European still keeps it well off the coast of Cape Hatteras and well to the west of Bermuda. The American model much closer to Bermuda. And that's kind of where the American has been, on the eastern side. The European has been on the western side, sort of that track. And you'll notice that we will see those northeast winds coming in. These are isobars. They're lines of equal pressure. They're a typical map that meteorologists use. And the more lines there are, the more tightly packed they are, the stronger the winds. And the more lines there are, the stronger the storm. It's strengthening. It's lower pressure. So think of it like a bowl, so to speak. Those lines, the lower pressure. And again, winds typically follow the contours of those isobars. So we'll see those northeast winds coming in as we head into early next week. So again, the European a little bit closer to the coast, but well offshore. The American farther offshore. And then eventually, of course, moves off towards the northeast and up into the North Atlantic. So that's what we call the deterministic run. That's the main run of the models. Here's the ensemble run. And essentially, again, what we do is we take that model that you saw and we run it multiple times. We tweak the initial conditions because up until really yesterday, we didn't have much information on exactly what was going on with Erin. It was all interpreted by satellites. Now we have Hurricane Hunter aircraft that have flown in there, and they are giving us that information, so we have much more information on the track of the storm. So let's go ahead and show you, again, those ensemble runs and show you where they're forecasting the storm to go. And some of these are run, 60 different times. So you can see here in red, those are the ensemble runs of the European, which you notice, again, that the European was closer to the U.S. coastline, but it has some ensemble members that are east, even here in Bermuda. It has one that brings it closer to the coast. This would likely be a weaker system, having that turn a little bit later. And you can see here that it crosses over the Outer Banks. Again, that is one out of, I think, 80 or so members of the two ensembles that bring it onshore. And that's the same one that brings it here right through the Bahamas. So again, that's probably a weaker storm. A stronger storm would turn a little bit earlier. And you can see the vast majority, the consensus, keeps the storm offshore. So that's why we're fairly confident. We can't totally write it off because we still have to wait for that turn to happen. And that would happen on Monday. So over the next couple of days, as we go through the weekend, we'll get a lot more information in. We'll get a little bit closer to when that turn is expected to occur. And we'll have a better idea of what's happening and where the storm will go. But again, the ensembles, again, vast majority keep it offshore, some a little bit closer to the U.S. coast, some closer to Bermuda, and some even east of Bermuda. I think those are also the outliers, I would say. Sometimes outliers verify, but in this case, I think we're fairly confident that we're going to see the storm pass offshore. But we will feel some effects here in Hampton Roads. So let's talk about those effects quickly. Increasing rip currents in the next week. We already have moderate rip current posted for tomorrow because of the northeast winds. And I wouldn't be surprised if even as we get into the day on Monday that we see those red flags start to fly. So increasing rip currents in the next week. Some rough surf, some beach erosion is possible, especially along the Outer Banks. Outer Banks are very vulnerable, so we could see some beach erosion. Of course, we'll have to watch what happens down towards Rodanthe. A lot of those homes down there, it's fairly perilous that are right there along the waterline. And tides could be running a little bit higher than normal. Not looking at a major issue with high tides, but certainly it's possible that we could see those tides running a little bit higher than normal. So that's what we're watching as we go here with Hurricane Erin over the next couple of days. We'll get a lot more information as we go into this weekend, so be sure to follow along here online. Of course, every night at 8 o'clock, even through the weekend, we'll have Hurricane Hub Live. That's when we take even a deeper dive into what's going on in the tropics, and we'll be focusing this entire weekend on Erin, the impacts here in coastal Virginia, North Carolina, and up and down the eastern seaboard. So be sure to join us for Hurricane Hub Live weeknights at 8 o'clock when we again take a deeper dive into what's going on with Erin. So that's the latest from the 13 News Now Weather Center. The 2 o'clock advisory in from the National Hurricane Center on Hurricane Erin. Of course, we'll have updates throughout the weekend.